Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Edmonds. I'm the Research Fellow at the Beacon Center. And today I'm joined with two guests. We have Chris Sinacola, who is the co-author of Hands-on Achievement, a new book looking at the vocational technical schools in Massachusetts. As well, I'm joined by Jamie Gass, the director of the Center for School Reform at the Pioneer Institute in Massachusetts. Thank you both for joining me.
Thank you, Jason.
Oh, thanks so much for having us.
So the new publication, Hands-on Achievement, has some really impressive data on these really innovative schools in Massachusetts, the vocational technical schools. So really, can you talk a little bit about the data and why you decided to release this book now?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, Jason, really appreciate you having us on to help share the lessons of this book. But I really want to tip my hat to Chris Sinacola and Dave Ferrer, the two editors who synthesized in this book all the research that we've done for about 10 years or so on these really high quality voc tech schools that we have here in Massachusetts. To kind of set the table a little bit, in 1993, we had bipartisan support for a pretty wide-ranging, very successful ed reform effort that basically put additional money into the system in exchange for cod liver oil, like high-stakes testing, high academic standards in English, math, and science, accountability throughout the entire system, teacher testing. And we're really proud of the achievement that Massachusetts has experienced under that reform model that's taken us to the top of the country in NAEP and the only state that's internationally competitive, as well as having great charter schools. But truth be told, the group of schools that have seen the biggest improvement under ed reform in the last almost 30 years now has been the voc tech schools. For many years, they were not among the high-performing schools, really struggled, but they embraced the accountability measures, the high academic quality in English, math, and science, which has really driven them to being, I think, a national model. And really, some of the main points of them is that they are schools of choice, so it's important that parents and students pick these schools. They have great relationships with the business community, so they're able to place their graduates into the work and to the fields of work that they pursue. But they've also done this while having a very small dropout rates and really high percentage of special needs kids. So they're doing it with, in some respects, a more difficult population to serve. But we felt like, given the lessons here and the successes here, that it's a really good time to share the lessons from Massachusetts voc tech schools to help boost academic achievement as well as contribute to the larger economy.
That's wonderful. And you did touch on some special needs students there, and that was one of my questions. Looking through the book there, I did see that students that are with special needs or from lower income are actually in higher student populations in these vocational technical schools. However, these VOTech schools have higher graduation rates and higher testing achievement. Why do you think that is? And what do you think that the VOTech schools are doing differently than the district schools to get these wonderful achievements?
Yeah, I take a crack at that one. First of all, thanks very much, Jason, for the opportunity to speak on this. I think when Jamie mentioned that cod liver oil, I like that phrase, and it's really instructive as I looked back over what were originally a set of white papers, which is how this book came together, and reflected on not only the content there, but in my other work as a journalist over 30 years, really following a lot of these issues. A lot of things came back to me. It was like I recognized in the white papers the debates that were going on at the time, from the beginning when vocational technical education was viewed as lesser than comprehensive high schools. And then to see after ed reform, the change that took place, as Jamie so eloquently and well put it, it's been a remarkable journey. And I think the reason that we've seen this improvement is that when you set a higher standard and insist that people meet it, they rise to the occasion. And the vocational technical education community has done that. It's done remarkably well. And it has to be said that there was some initial skepticism as well, which I'm sure Jamie can speak to as well. But by keeping standards high, accepting the challenge, and not making excuses, not saying, well, these kids are urban, they're poor, they're economically disadvantaged, they haven't had all the opportunities that the kids in the predominantly white suburbs have had. They said, no, we're going to take this and we're going to build strong relationships with the business community. Yes, we're going to pour some money into it, better facilities, build a sense of pride, and go from there. And all those things have come together in a remarkable story, really.
Wonderful.
Yeah, if I could just sort of add on to that too. I mean, Chris did such a good job of encapsulating it, but I think that one of the things that's unique about these schools is they're autonomous. The voc-tech schools that have done the best in Massachusetts have been the regional voc-tech schools. So they've got a lot of school autonomy. The school choice is really important. And I think that that school autonomy and that really close culture that they have, and it's very distinctive. I think it's like charter schools or other sort of school-based managed schools, is that they make a lot of the decisions, policy decisions, that are centered really more around the child rather than the larger system. But there is, as Chris mentioned, some of the embedded schools have done quite well too. One of the best examples of an urban school that's done a great job on voc-tech reform has been the voc-tech school in Worcester, that struggled for many, many years. It's a diverse city. It certainly has a high percentage of special needs kids. But only a few years ago, both Secretary Arne Duncan, President Obama, and Colin Powell all visited this school and gave prominent speeches at it, highlighting that this isn't just the success of these voc-tech schools is just not a phenomenon of the suburbs or of white kids, but that urban kids, special needs kids, that this is a model that can work for them too. And so I think that's one of the things we're proud of is that, as Chris said so well, setting a really high academic standard and a high stakes test and trying to get as many kids of every zip code over that high standard. That's why Massachusetts has done well. And that's, I think, in particular, why the voc-tech schools have done so well.
That's great. Well, I know here in Tennessee, we do have career and technical education that is kind of embedded with the district schools there. And there's 16 what they call career clusters that these students can continue on. With all the autonomy and independence that the voc-tech schools have in Massachusetts, do they kind of have those stringent lines of saying you can only follow these certain career paths, or is it really open to whatever the local community needs and what the students really are excelling at?
I think there's quite a lot of flexibility, actually. The one theme that stood out for me was, and this was perhaps most noticeable, or the examples we had were from the regional districts, where they would, several of the superintendents that we interviewed over the years have said, we moved away from some shops, we replaced them with other shops. And this was based and guided really by the needs of the particular district. So you would see, sort of in a big picture way, less homemaking, what they called home ec in the old days, back in the 50s and 60s, before it wasn't necessarily, it may have been part of the regular school curriculum. And you'd see more things like computer-aided design and audiovisual, radio and TV production, that sort of thing. And then in Western Massachusetts, in the Pioneer Valley, west of Worcester, there's an aviation cluster where you have several airports and private firms, training programs at Westfield. The school out there has done a remarkable job with that. And again, that's a partnership between the school and the business community, in this case, aviation. So there aren't, I don't know that there's really a list. I suppose there could be a list. You could make a list up of all the trades and shops that are covered in Massachusetts. But it's not that the state is prescribing, you have to do these in your district. It's really left up to the advisory councils and the leadership of the school, and ultimately, of course, the voters and taxpayers in those districts. What is the demand? What do students want to study, essentially?
Yeah, I wonder if I could just add on to that. I think Chris really said it well. I think that part of the choice-driven model of these schools is that once the kids are in the schools, that they pick the things that they're interested in. And that has, I think, enormous application. And it's important because, frankly, one of the things that has been, I think, a weakness of the workforce development model of education in this country is that, and you certainly see it in other countries, they try to prescribe to kids what it is that they're going to do. And that model of either state officials or school officials playing a heavy hand in over directing kids into certain fields, I don't think is one that we should follow, because the fact is that we live in a democracy, and we want to make sure that kids of all backgrounds get the choice of where they go to school, but what they study, not have a state bureaucrat dictating, oh, you need to go into this line of work. Because the truth of it is, we want to make sure that people have equality of opportunity, and having that choice both in terms of where they go to school, but what they study. I mean, we see this in higher education in this country. No one in DC or any other state capital is dictating to kids where they go to school or what they have to study. And so I think there are a lot of lessons there. And I think that the voc tech schools in this state have worked hard to try to have it be student driven in terms of where the kids go to school and what they study.
Very interesting. And one of the things I really loved reading there was that I saw some of these schools that have culinary arts programs actually have restaurants that are open to the public, or ones that are more trade associated. They go and help the community and things that they need. So these are really taking students and putting what they're learning into action, and the public can actually see that. So I think it's just wonderful what is really going on in Massachusetts. So kind of final closing thoughts on you. What would you suggest other states do in relation to vocational technical education, and what has Massachusetts done right, and possibly what have they have areas for improvement in?
Well, I can take on some of that. I'm going to leave the what we've done wrong to Jamie. It's more of a political animal that I want to wrestle with, but certainly the autonomy, local governance is hugely important. And building on these themes we've discussed throughout this session, you really need to have school committees have that autonomy. We've seen that succeed really throughout the state, with a few exceptions. Boston is a different kind of animal. And you've got to fund it. You also have to advocate, not only for the funding, but you have to advocate at the lower grades, the middle school level, to get the 8th graders interested. So I think there's been, when going back to ed reform in the state, it created charter schools. And the purpose of those, in part, was to learn with the regular public schools so that the two would feed off one another. There's been a lot of resistance to that. There remains a lot of resistance to that. But one of the things that really has taken place is, it turns out the voc tech have led the way. They have perhaps had the most cross-fertilization, if you will. And charters, while very successful, there's still an antagonistic relationship with the regular public schools in many cases. But you have to really fight for money and autonomy, and getting those 8th graders eyeballs on the voc thing so that they know that's an option for them. If they don't know it, if their parents don't know it, they're not going to show up at the school board meetings. They're not going to show up at town meeting to support the budgets. And they're going to just default to a regular school where a particular child might do okay, but they might really thrive in a vocational environment, and they should have that option.
Yeah, Chris said that so well. I mean, I think the thing about ed reform in Massachusetts is that the state did not try to do too much. There were some specific levers that they pulled in terms of academic quality, high stakes testing, teacher testing, and some funding. But they really left the work of ed reform really to the local level. The people that were doing the work and own the work. I think that the best example of that is the voc tech schools, their autonomy, them being school choice schools, being accountable too. I mean, the fact is that because they're more locally funded by the local school committees, if they weren't performing, they never would have been able to get these huge wait lists that they have now. And so there's a lot of things, as Chris said, about local autonomy and local choice and that local accountability that matters. And the state kind of knew the things that it could do well and did not try to overstep those or be overly prescriptive, but left the work up to the schools. And I think we've seen that has been successful. In terms of the things that we haven't done well, there's a recent change to the admissions requirements in Massachusetts that essentially the local districts are fighting back, because now as these voc tech schools are doing well and have wait lists and are getting a lot of notoriety both in the state and nationally, there's some resentment from the urban districts in particular that have not done as good a job. And so there's been some efforts at the state level and through kind of bureaucratic means to peel back some of the advantages that these schools have and get rid of some of the minimum entrance requirements that are really important, because the fact is that these schools are much more expensive than most schools because they have the machinery, they have a lot of the shops, they have all of these additional things that aren't just, from the 20th century, they're 21st century in terms of having kids prepared for medical technicians and work in ambulances and life sciences. And so there's been some pushback from the people that are sort of more defenders of the status quo. But I think, if I had to kind of summarize the lessons, the things that are important for other states to do, I think they're going to have to do things that are going to fit best for them. What we've done in Massachusetts has worked well for Massachusetts. There are some lessons, I think, about high academic quality, focusing like a laser on high academic quality, not having it just turn into soft skills, having high expectations in terms of a graduation test, a high stake graduation request, as well as making sure that the people in the system are accountable. Education's expensive. And the fact is that kids need to have choices, but the adults in the system need to be accountable for their performance. It's both good in terms of a basic civil right, and as well as the need to be able to compete in our larger economy. And then these kinds of schools here have done a good job of encapsulating a lot of those So again, the big takeaway lessons from here in Massachusetts and our Voc Tech schools is that they really, like a laser, focused on high academic quality. There was a high stakes test for graduation that these schools have met and in many instances exceeded. The adults throughout the entire system have been held accountable, and this is all vitally important because the local school autonomy, the people doing the work, owning the work, the kids having choices, this is a great benefit to not only the sort of basic civil rights of kids having access to high quality education, but it's got broader implications for competitiveness in the workforce and the larger global economy. So we hope there's some lessons from this book that we can share with other states.
That was wonderful. I do want to thank you both for your time today. And if you can kind of give a little information on where people could read the book and if they had any additional questions, how they could reach you.
Sure. So thanks again, Jason, for hosting us. The name of the book is Hands-on Achievement, Massachusetts National Model in Vocational Technical Schools. It's published by Pioneer Institute. Two authors of the book are Chris Sinacola and Dave Ferreira, and you can find it on our website at pioneerinstitute.org, and it's also available on Amazon.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.